Hey, I'd like to welcome everybody to our Education Committee meeting. I think that some of our colleagues have been down at Capitol Days in St. Louis County and Duluth Days down in our St. Paul, so that's exciting. I can move that. So we can always adjust the agenda as well if we get to parts of our meeting and some haven't arrived, but it looks like Assistant Superintendent Starzecki is with us. Sorry. I'm just going to give her a minute, though, to okay, I know you are.
Thanks. We do have one change, though. I think Edie needs to start with us today. Does that sound about right?
And Edie first instead of before Lincoln Park, so right away after you? Before you, after you?
Is she here?
Mm-hmm, she is. I saw her. She just stepped out.
Okay.
If anybody has an extra mouse that they don't use because they use something else, I'd love it because I left my mouse. But I can handle it, but sure. Does Edie want to go before you even?
She can if she's here. I'm just going to pull up the agenda here.
So do I have to take roll?
I think so.
Ed? Okay. I did hear from both members, Trinka and Sandstead, that they wouldn't be here. So I think we're all here.
Okay, so I'm going to start with my report, and then, like I said, we're going to start with Edie to share an update because she has to leave us this evening, and then we'll jump into the regular rotation of the agenda. So the first thing here is my assistant superintendent report to the board. I typically like to indicate the site visits that we've made or are about to make, and so you'll see there's been a lot of site visits recently. Most recently we had the Rock Ridge open house, and I was there prior to that as well, doing some walkthroughs. Ordine East, Congdon, Lester Park, and Piedmont are our site visits that are scheduled in the upcoming month. This is the time of year where we are starting the planning process for next year when it comes to schedule development. And so as I've reported out each year, we have just completed our student registration process. So we're getting an idea of what our students have registered for going into next year for courses. Dr. Carey and the secondary principals are using that information now to identify the number of sections and work that we need to do to start the planning for the master schedule this spring. And that's a process that we've been trying to really do as early as possible so that we can get a good handle on how many sections of each course we need, including staffing allocations as those are coming out. So that work has been happening. And then the last part of my report is just a little bit about some of the stakeholder engagement things that we've been working on across the district. The superintendent, myself, and Doug Hassler have been are in the process of meeting with staff over the next few months to have some listening sessions. It's really meant just to be an opportunity for people to share how they think things are going across the district and to gather that information so we can use that as part of our planning in the future. We're trying to engage with all different bargaining units and all different staff across our buildings, whether it's cafeteria staff, principals, classroom teachers, support staff, just being able to have some conversation that's in a structured way and give people the opportunity to share their thoughts. And then lastly, I think the superintendent will talk more about this in the upcoming board meeting, I'm sure, but we've got our Think Kids sessions coming up, which is another way that we're gathering some feedback from our community and sharing some of the work that we're doing recently for our students. So there's a lot going on with stakeholder engagement right now, and that work will continue. And that's all I have. Oh, I guess Dr. Gary has something.
Just one real quick thing to add, just for kind of information for the board, is that part of that course registration and sectioning, really right now the work that the principals are able to do is kind of a rough draft, because ultimately what comes out in our sectioning is impacted based on our staffing, and our staffing conversations are part of our budgeting, right? So we have to really wait to get closer to the end of the budgeting process to know concretely what our staffing scenarios are going to look like for next year, because that plays into our sectioning at the buildings. So I just want you to be aware of how those things are connected and that it impacts the timing of some of that work for the principals.
Any other questions?
A peripheral question. It's not related, sort of related to this. How many days, the schedule, how many days are there in the school year? How many
School days?
are school days? And how many are required? And what's the average in the state? Are we, do you know? I know it varies.
There aren't a minimum number of days by the state. There is a recommended hours level. That's 1,020 hours for the high school. And, I can't remember the number for the elementary is 800 something, upper 800s. I'd have to look it up to be exactly sure. And that is recommended by the state. We do meet those levels at the middle and high school and are well beyond the elementary minimums.
Seeing no one other questions, we're going to move on and we're going to adjust that agenda. Is that okay?
So we have a lot, as you can tell, of presentations tonight of people waiting in the wings. So thank you, everybody. We've got some principals here to share some graduation work. We've got Lincoln Park here to share some of the great things happening at their school. We have William Howes here to speak a little bit on the integration, achievement and integration grant update. However, first we want to offer Edie to come up from the Department of American Indian Education. Annually, she does give us an update and this work regarding the resolution of concurrence and non-concurrence. And so they are here to share that annual report with us. And then from there, we'll go through the normal progression of the agenda items. This is an action item as well for the board, just so you know.
Page 60.
Yes, it is. The actual agenda item is an action item 2A2 is the actual item they'll be presenting on. Thank you for coming.
Welcome.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to say miigwech for adjusting the schedule. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to come in front of you all once a year to present the resolution of concurrence and non-concurrence for Duluth Public Schools American Indian Education Program. I have a few support people with me, and I'll let them introduce themselves real quick before we get into our presentation.
I'm Danny Dunphy, a member of the Parent Advisory Council. What do they call us?
American Indian Parent Advisory
There you
Committee.
go.
Hi, I'm Janelle Zuick. I'm a parent. I have a senior at East and 2 Lester Park elementary school students. I used to be on the parent committee, and so I'm just here.
Although she's not on the committee, she highly supports the work that we do, and she provides us with a lot of input. So I appreciate them both being here. I know that I do have a few other people planning on showing up because I looked at the agenda online and I thought we wouldn't be until later in the evening. But if they show up, I might be gone by then, but I'll send them a message. So what we're here to talk about is the resolution of concurrence and non-concurrence, that by law we are required to look at Duluth Public Schools and what they are doing in regards to providing opportunities, services for American Indian students outside of the work that I'm required as American Indian Education Program. Not to say that we can't include the items that we collaborate on, because over the years since I've been here, the collaboration has grown. I've been around more tables in decision-making processes at a district level to bring the American Indian community perspective, it's been amazing. And so for those of you that are new on the school board, our resolution, when I first came, was about, 10 pages long, at least. And it followed this really weird structure that it did not make sense to me. It did not fall in line with the goals and visions of Duluth Public Schools. So over the years, myself and the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee adjusted our resolution to work alongside Duluth Public Schools and the goals and objectives that are district-wide, because American Indian students are considered Duluth Public School students as well, and so they are part of the district. And so we spent a lot of time aligning our resolution to make sure that they fall in line with some of the district goals and objectives, and also working with a lot of district departments to make sure that we are being inclusive of American Indian students and families' perspectives. But the reason we're here is we have our resolution, and we can either be, as a school district, we can agree with what has been happening for our American Indian students, or we can disagree. And until structures, policies, curriculum, teachers, all of those things change, I believe we will be here in disagreement of Duluth Public Schools in regards to American Indian students. I understand over the years, our data has increased, but it's still not good enough. So you can go through, I'm not going to sit here and read the resolution to you all. I just want to make some points and be able to be available to answer any questions. And so some of the few things that we like to bring up specifically is we understand that there are cuts in Duluth Public Schools, but we want to make sure that those cuts don't directly impact the success of American Indian students. And for those of you that are new on the school board, if you have had an opportunity to understand this American Indian Education Department, we I don't want to say we generate, but we apply for funding that's specifically for American Indian students. And we, over the years, have been getting some funds from general fund to keep us functioning, which is always a plus. And also looking at about 5 years ago, we were in front of the school board presenting for Masabi Congo Ojibwe Immersion Program, and that's been a successful program, I believe, in regards for American Indian students. And so we just want to make sure, as we're moving forward and looking at a resolution and looking at the things that Duluth Public Schools is providing or are not providing for American Indian students, we feel that when it comes to funding, not to just rely on American Indian Education Department to fund the programming for American Indian students. And I'm not saying that Duluth Public Schools does not fund for Masabikong, because they do generate and give us money for that. But we also want to make it clear that there is a line item in here on other, and it talks about resources allocated for American Indian education, specifically Masabikong, are not evenly balanced and roles are not well defined, meaning there's a coordinator for the Spanish immersion program, but there was never a coordinator for Masabikong until we wrote a grant in order for us to get a coordinator. So those are things that we talk about as a parent committee, that when we're talking about equitable funding or equity, those are some of the things that we talk about in regards to the resolution. And we want to make sure that those things are, people are made aware of that, because oftentimes the community and others are not aware of the extra work that sometimes we do in order to fund our programs to benefit American Indian students. I don't know if there's anything that you want to.
I'll say something.
Okay.
I always get up here and get so emotional because, I don't know, because I love my kiddos. I think last year I brought up the fact that we need to remember, was it last year or the year before? I don't know, I was crying about it. That's all I remember. That we needed to remember the kids, the sleepy kids, the hungry kids, the kids that don't have pencils, the kids that are wearing their cleanest, dirtiest clothes. But I also want you to remember the American Indian students who have stable households and who are well fed and are loved, and parents that don't have to go through problems. And I will say that because I provide a very stable home for my son, and I am having the hardest time getting him across that stage this year. And I do need the help of American Indian education. I do need the integration specialist's help. I have a 4-year-old that can't read very well, and we try to read 2 books every night, and he just hates reading. And I went to conferences and for my kindergartner, and I can't understand why my kids can't read so well. And I try so hard. And just remember that people are trying out there because people love their kids, but they do need help. So that's all.
Wow. I agree, and I 100% agree that not only does my staff need to hear that, but our principals, our teachers, our administrators, anyone in the school need to have the understanding that when we're looking at American Indian families, yes, we come from a different cultural background. We may come from this idea of learning differently, because it's true. Because when I sat up here and we talked about Ojibwe language immersion, for us as American Indian people, our language is the center of who we are. And our language makes us think differently. Just because it provides words that are similar to English, it brings a whole nother thought process. And I'm not trying to give you an excuse or an example of maybe why your kid can't read. Maybe because your kid knows Ojibwe first, and he struggles with the English concepts. I mean, that could be it. But, in talking about Duluth Public Schools and relationship to American Indian students, I think it's really important that we take this time and opportunity to continue to provide cultural sharing, other cultural learning opportunities, and to really look at a structure where it's required. We have a diverse school district. We have a diverse set of staff and students. And I think it's important, I'm up here representing American Indian education and students, but I'm also here to represent all kids because I believe that we're here to work for all students. And so many students bring different diverse perspectives and different family perspectives that I think through this process in regards to American Indian students, it's an opportunity for us to not just look at American Indian students and their diversity, but all students. And so I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to come up and present this. And like I said, I'm not going to read over it. And it will be posted on our website for those of you that don't have a copy, and you can look at some of the concerns that we have as American Indian Parent Advisory Committee when it comes to American Indian students for Duluth Public Schools. My understanding is after presenting, the school board has 60 days to reply, which means it's a written reply. I know last year I sat down with Superintendent Gronseth, but this year they're asking for a written reply instead of a verbal or email reply from me. I never got it in writing. No. So, and there's new forms and different process. So if it looks different than it did last year, and I also will need on one of the first pages, I'll need a signature from the school board chairperson and the superintendent. but I believe that was supposed to get after we presented.
I guess I just wanted to, be of support to you, and I just know that my son would never have graduated from here if it wasn't for a homeschool liaison that connected with him. He was never connected with the school. He really never felt comfortable in the school, and didn't believe that they even wanted him there if it really wasn't for the connection that we had with the Indian Education Program providing those homeschool liaisons. My son would have likely been a high school dropout. Luckily, he was able to connect with that homeschool liaison, and I just want to just really stress how important that is, that my son came from a very stable home as well. He was never hungry. He was always wearing clean, good clothes. I was there for him, and every time he had a problem, it was always my fault that it was a problem in school. And we never really had any kind of collaboration going on with the school as to how we could improve those kind of things. So if it really wasn't for what the department provided for my son, he would never have graduated. So it's so important that we remain funded and we have these programs for our children. They are working, our graduation rates are increasing, and I have seen it in person that it helped my boy.
Superintendent Groundshead.
First of all, thank you for doing this work. I know that you spend a lot of time on this, and I know how involved all of you are, not just with this report, but with the parent committee and with a lot of different areas in American Indian education. I do have a process question, and I remember we had this conversation last year because it gets presented, and then there's a response, and then and then it comes back to us. And I can't remember if the board is supposed to receive it as informational this time, and then once there's a response, they make the resolution, or if it's because it's a resolution from the American Indian Parent Council that is coming to us for review, and then the school board then passes a resolution afterwards. And I think we just need to double check, because I know that in the statute where this is provided for, it does give the order that should happen. So we'll do that before next week. And if it's supposed to be received as informational this time, we can carry it forward until we have the response.
I do know that this is the process we followed last year. So if it needs,
and
if it's different,
I was thinking we did it backwards last year.
Okay, so we'll get some clarity. Make sure it's right.
Yeah. My understanding is this is an informational item, and then the response is the action item, and then you all sign on it, then we send it down.
It's on now as an action item. We'll have to clarify, because this is the process from last year, so if it needs to look different, we can do that for Tuesday.
Okay.
Superintendent.
No, I was just going to.
Member Oswald.
Thank you. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing with us, your stuff from the heart. It really does affect me personally anyway. And I know I try to do my best to help all kids. So I know I've been a strong advocate, but I can do better. And I will try. My question is, I had a question about Saturday school. Do we do Saturday school, and what does that look like? Because that is in one of the recommendations, that we continue Saturday school requirement /option. Sorry, the people at home might want to hear.
I'll start since she's not up here yet. Yes, we do Saturday school at East. Typically at least 2 times a month. Those dates are set at the beginning of the year and published. Saturday school is optional. Students can choose to come. Teachers can also refer them. So it's a way to make up on some missed attendance, perhaps, if they're starting to get up there in unexcused absences. It is primarily an academic intervention, however. So when a teacher puts in a recommendation for Saturday school, we call it prescription for success, and they turn in an RX slip. Our assistant principal and dean of students meet before Saturday school then, and they line up every student with a tutor who will meet them at Saturday school and work with them. Typically there's an arrangement made with the teacher who's recommended that might go against their policy for late work or makeup work, and so they're allowed to retain some points then if they redo an assignment or get some help from a tutor. It has grown exponentially even since I've been there, so we are now paying 2 staff members to be there for Saturday school. We've seen a lot of success there. We get a lot of positive feedback from parents and students and teachers, so we do plan to continue Saturday school.
We don't have Saturday school. So I'm not sure what the question is. As far as academic support, we have Monday through Thursday after school from 3:25 to 5:45. Our media center is open, where not only our DASH program. Before we had our DASH program, we had the media center open, where we have staff from National Honor Society to our staff that stay after on any given day, Monday through Thursday, to help students with academic support.
Thank you. That provides a lot of clarity and fills a lot of gaps in my knowledge. My question is there a threat of it discontinuing in next year's budget?
Do you plan to continue next year?
Yeah. I just asked if there was any threat of Saturday school disappearing in next year's budget. So.
Well, the funds that we have been using for our after school, if they're still available, we intend to continue.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair Kirby.
Thanks. Edie, what kind of direct support, student supports, do you offer in elementary schools, other than the homeschool liaison? Because we've been talking about high schools, but...
We do have our American Indian Homeschool Liaisons, and the supports that they provide is within the MTSS model. They help in Tier 1 and Tier 2. They help with interventions. They do in-class small groups, those types of things. So when it comes to elementary, that's what we have academically, and then we also have, depending on their site, they will have cultural after-school programming. But other than that, that's kind of what we have. We have 4 American Indian Homeschool Liaisons for our 537 American Indian students.
Yep, comment and a question. First of all, thank you, all 3 of you, Danny, my neighbor Janelle, and Edie for your presentation and being here. And this is one of the reports that I look forward to every year hearing from particularly the parents that are here, so and that aren't here, that have been here in the past. So I really appreciate it. And the vote, my first vote was actually on the Ojibwe program, one of my first votes, and I'm very proud of that. But my question for you is, of all the different recommendations, and this is more maybe for Danny and Janelle, are there a couple that you particularly would want to highlight to us? I know they're all important, but just would like to hear from you.
For me, obviously, I will put all my votes in graduation.
Thank you.
I would second that, except for I would also add that some of the state standards our students are they're lagging behind their white peers, and I'd like to see that decrease, because if they're doing well in school, our children are likely to be graduating rather than not doing well in school and giving up.
Thank you.
She's first. Oh.
Thank you. I just had a follow-up question about Saturday school. I was just curious how students get there. Does the Indian Ed department provide anything, or like bus passes or anything?
As far as I know right now, if it's by student choice or if teachers, most parents will provide transportation. And I know in the past, some of my staff had requested individual bus tickets, and so we provided those.
Is there a penalty for anybody not being able to get there?
I'm not sure, because I don't know a whole lot about Saturday school. It was just something that was brought up by the committee and the students that, as we were working on this, they just wanted to make sure that we as a district will continue that, because it's been useful and utilized for our students. So there really hasn't been a discussion about lack of transportation, and I wouldn't know that. That would be probably come from each of the sites.
We do give bus passes, and there's no punishment if you don't.
Bus passes, no punishment. Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Just one real quick comment I wanted to share is one time I had a person I really respect, share an idea with me that I hadn't thought of before. And so I just wanted to share it in front of this group, which is if you come to school every day and you never see your perspective or values or traditions reflected day to day in the learning opportunities that are provided in the school, the unintentional message is that this isn't a place for you. And that really resonated with me, especially in my role, is because starting to think about how often do we reflect the perspectives, thoughts, and traditions that are important to our American Indian students as part of the learning in our schools. And I think that that's a place where we could make some excellent progress, assuming we would provide and put some resource towards seeing that achieved. That would go a long way, not only from an American Indian perspective, but also some of the cultural perspectives of other students we serve.
Yeah, hi, Lydia, thanks for being here. I asked the other two parents, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you've been involved with this process for a few years, and I greatly appreciate that. What I asked Danny and Janelle was just, were there a couple recommendations, they're all important, but that were particularly important to you that you just want to kind of share a little perspective on?
Nothing, like just all of it in general is a lot of, we can talk about curriculum and stuff like that. I think that that's something that's in particular important, because it doesn't just apply to our students, it applies to everybody. And I think some of what, when you talk about climate of schools, it's not just our students feeling welcome, it's having other students recognize our students and understand when you talk about the aspect of bullying and stuff like that. So the curriculum, having all students have an accurate representation, an accurate history of who our students are, I feel like that goes a long way. And having that portrayed in the classroom can help our students feel like this is a place for them. But all of it's important.
I just wanted to say thanks to Mike. I think that was a nice way of kind of wrapping up this important topic, and I second that, so nicely said. Thank you for coming. It looks like we have no more questions.
I just want to comment on Dr. Carey too, because I actually have really been intentional in my desire. I'm not as successful, but, and I know Janelle and I know Lydia too, but to represent, I've always wanted to reach out. I know in the theater and in the speech and the debate world, if the student doesn't see themselves represented on my team, it just doesn't look like it's a welcoming activity or an after school. And we're trying to make gains in those extracurricular activities as well. And I just want to really reach out for help too, to how do we engage our students to also reach after school activities and know that there's a place for them there. But when there's no coaches and there's no leadership and there's no one else then that looks like them, then again, that message, unintended, is that there's not a place for them. And I just want to break that ceiling. I want to break that barrier. And it just seems to elude me every season. But I love that we're here talking about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Okay, as we transition to our next presentation, our next item is our Lincoln Park Middle School team is here to share the work they've been doing for the past year on the continuous improvement process, and they look like they're dressed for the occasion, so I will let them.
We'll probably have to scoot closer. All right. Join us. Hello. Thank you for taking the time tonight to have us here. And before we start, I just want to give a shout out to Assistant Superintendent Starzecki for her work behind continuous improvement teams and leading that charge all across the district. We have had a team, an improvement team for 5 years at Lincoln Park Middle School, but in the last 2 years, the team is really changing. And I think it's because of her continual support and her leadership, and it's making us a better team. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Brenda Vathauer, the principal at Lincoln Park Middle School. And yes, we brought the ore, we brought the gear. We're going to talk tonight about our current reality. We're going to talk about some of our successes and also some of our barriers and challenges, and share with you the process we're in right now. And that's some of what I'm wearing, and the others have tools as well. So I'd like to introduce the team.
I'm Jacob Hinstad. I'm the assistant principal at Lincoln Park Middle School.
I'm Katie Oliver, and I work at Lincoln Park Middle School.
Sarah Hendricks, 7th grade special ed.
Molly Fletcher, 6th grade MTSS coordinator.
Ann Letko, math interventionist. Rachel Tapa, community school coordinator.
Okay, I'm going to ask you guys, why do you think they brought tools tonight? I brought the oar. I'm wearing the captain's hat. I'm just going to ask the board, what did you think when we walked up here? We're not elementary. We are middle school.
Have you fun?
Yes, we have fun. We're other thoughts?
You each bring a different tool to the table and do a different thing to complete your puzzle of what you do as a whole.
Anybody else?
Continuous improvement team adds tools to their toolbox based on their skill set that we all have. We all need a toolbox, so I want some of those tools. And we share our tools, I'm sure. And in your team, I would imagine we've come together to share all the different tools that we use to be successful. Right?
Okay. Good answer. Good answer. Anybody else? We're rolling along, are we? All right. Thank you. Actually, we're going to talk to you about how we're rebuilding our ship. Lincoln Park Middle School, we have successes that we're going to share, absolutely. But we know we have some holes in our boat, and we're having water come in our boat, and we are in the process right now of rebuilding. So, any more on the rebuilding before we dive into Okay. And we'll talk about that. Okay, Bart, what do I need to do to advance it? Sorry. All right, thanks. Okay, some of our celebrations. We're not going to talk about everything on every slide. I think you have all the presentation. We're going to highlight some things. And I'll just start off with talking about introducing the community school partnerships. With being a community school, we're reaching out, we're partnering, we're looking at assets in the community and continuing to build that process. And through some of the work that Rachel does as community school coordinator, strengthening some of the programs we have launched, as well as seeking other opportunities out there to meet the needs of our students and families. So keep going. All right.
What do you want to see?
Another highlight is our parent-teacher home visit project, which many of you have heard of, and we're growing. Building those relationships, we know that is huge, very, very important. And now this spring, looking to pair with fifth grade teachers and go out and meet some of the new fifth grade students so we can build that relationship prior to the kids coming to us next year. Another celebration is PBIS. We've been a PBIS school for...
Since we actually started at Lincoln Park Middle School.
6 years?
And
6 years.
Being there 6 years, I'm starting to realize my age at this point when I realized I didn't bring my bifocals and this is pretty small print. So with that, with the PBIS, I know that we've been making progress with that, and it's something that as a school we focused on, and it's something that we will continue to work on. I know that we were just completing our survey for this school year to see where we're at, and hopefully that we can continue improving. So.
And the last one, I'll let you guys talk about the work of the continuous improvement team. The leadership these people show. Now you guys are being a little quiet right now, but we have leaders up here with tremendous talent.
We're super excited about what's happening in our school. We've been waiting for a really long time. One of the reasons that we chose a boat as an analogy is because throughout the time that Brenda has been at our school, from the very first time she came in, I believe she brought that oar with her and made us sign it, and we were like, what? Okay, we'll sign it. And then some of us read Teach Like a Pirate, so then there was another nautical theme. And so we came back to that nautical theme when we were thinking about our school, and these fishbone activities also bring us back to the nautical. And as a team, we really struggled to do the root cause analysis because what we found out is that we're all in crisis. And our system and our boat isn't working. So it's not one thing. We can't pinpoint a hole in our boat. We've got a lot of holes in our boat. And a lot of us are either holding with everything that we have to keep our boat together, as well as everyone's throwing water, trying to keep. We're very reactive. So this is a great opportunity. I'll start to cry if I talk about Amy. But all of the systems that we've been trained in the last few years and the district initiatives of CIT teams, PLCs, MTSS have all our systems. And so we're relooking at our school and taking our boat apart because we have really good things like community school. We're in a perfect place right now. We've got community school, we've got PBIS, we've got integration specialists, we've got change happening within our community with equity. We're in a good spot to be rebuilding our boat. So we're really excited about it. And despite leadership changes in our district, I hope that we get our continued support. I'm the wild card who's going to say that here. So, but that's something that I would hope. And through this process, thanks Rachel for all of her work with community schools. Yeah. Because that's put us in a good place to invite everybody to the table to help us rebuild. This isn't about us. It's about also there's lots of people in our community to come to the table to help us so that the boat that we build can move forward. So that's kind of boat analogy. Go ahead. Huh? That's it.
I was going to say that there's some of the stuff that we do within our school that I think in some ways we're leaders within the district on that. And not to sell that stuff short with the homeschool visits. And, you know, there's stuff that we have that ability to lead in it. And we will continue to do that. And she did forget the dragon boat that we did do.
We actually built a dragon boat, and we were going to bring it today, but once you start to build and it ends up being a lot bigger than you thought, because there ended up being a lot of people who want to be in the boat tomorrow, so I'm sure. It didn't. Our boat didn't fit in the car.
We have a staff meeting tomorrow morning, so the boat will be presented. Our continuous improvement team is up on the screen there, but as we're going through this process of looking at our needs, the continuous improvement team is like ripples. We're pulling in more people and more people within our building. We're going to be reaching out to students to get student voice, and we're also reaching out to parents and board members. You will be invited at some point to come and hear what we've done and have your thoughts come on board as well. So watch for that. But there's our team that regularly meets. When you look at our proficiency, we haven't met proficiency. And this is another example of why we're rebuilding. When you look at math, 45% of our students proficient in math. Here's the bar, 45% get over that bar. And in reading, 48% last year. And so that's been consistent since I've been here in 5 years. Just low proficiency. We are making some gains, but we need to do some overhaul. And then also we're looking at the attendance, which is also a community school-wide issue, if not district-wide issue, looking at attendance. Our truancy rate last year was 29% of our students. So that was a goal that continues to be a goal this year on truancy. And then we had a couple of focus areas of increasing parent communication as well as increasing family engagement in students' activities and families involved in the activities in our building. Data, math data, trend data. Anne's our math interventionist. She does a phenomenal job at Lincoln Park Middle School, working with both teachers and students.
So there's been a little bit of upswing in the data, in the math data. But one of the things we did is we did away with the trans math in 2 grades. It'll be really interesting to see with those students who didn't have that exposure to the standards, to the grade level standards, what kind of gains. So one of the things that we're doing to monitor the gain is to look at growth, student growth, as opposed to their MCA score, because it takes so much to get to that next level of MCA number that we hope we can focus on the growth and get that. That's one way of getting it. Another is doing what we call flex days, where we pull kids out to work in small groups because we don't have many opportunities in our day. We have WIN this year, which is 30 minutes. So we need to really have those kids in WIN for a couple weeks in order to really get them to a point of mastery with a skill that they might be deficient in. So we've got the WIN that we're working on, interventions. We've got flex days where I work with grade level teams, the math teachers, and we work with looking at the PLC data and pull kids into small groups that way as well. So it's a work in progress.
How about reading? Highlights on reading?
Thanks for the mic, Molly. Yeah.
Same. It's pretty much the same. It's been pretty consistent. We haven't been over 50%. There's a lot of other things that tend to come up that we can't a lot of times get to the academics. the truancy, the skipping, some behaviors. I know that there's consideration for schedule, the 7 periods or 6 period day, or all of that kind of stuff coming up too. I've been working with that group, and some of that supports the help that we need in making our MTSS and all of that rung together in our PLCs. So we're doing the best we can with what we have. Yeah.
All right. So kind of just a summary last year of our needs assessment that we did do. We looked at the climate has improved at Lincoln Park Middle School over the past 3 years. Grade level teams are meeting now once a week, working together. Relationship building, we have put that so high on the priority list. From when I started 5 years ago until now, you hear teachers talking about building relationships with students and parents. That is key in our building. That's key. And PLCs are really making some nice gains. So looking at our school goals, Ann mentioned the growth. This is the first year in the 5 years that we have looked at growth versus proficiency. So we've got some ranges depending on the grade level for growth. Kids meeting high growth in reading. We want to see 50% of all kids meeting high growth, as well as in math. And then again, we have an attendance goal, as well as a parent communication and family engagement goal, or focus area, I guess. Anything else to add, team?
I just want to say, I think the reason we worked as a team and discussed why focus on the growth, it helps drive teachers' instruction. It shows, a kid may not be proficient, but if they are making growth, there's learning that's happening. So I just think that's important to highlight a little bit.
Thank you.
I did have one question about how truancy is being defined in here. It says 7 or more unexcused absences. Do you mean periods or days?
Periods.
Yeah.
On
7 different days.
Well, it'll be 1 or more period on several different days. It would be considered truant.
Thank you.
I'd like to just add something. So if you see this slide that says school action plan, there's a pyramid there. And I really want you to be aware that this committee, the CIT committee, the core CIT committee, I have to back up. So this pyramid is the result of so many people coming to the CIT meetings and participating and giving feedback. And I think that when you see these tools here, what it implies is that it's the committee driving it, but there are so many people vested in making these improvements at Lincoln Park. And I think that's what it's going to take. It really needs to be the whole staff buy-in. And I think that we see that momentum now. And when you look at that pyramid, you might not notice, but there's little cards there. And people have been giving feedback on areas of concern and areas that we could implement some strategies or some new initiatives or something to help tweak what we have going on right now. So I just wanted to emphasize that it is this committee, but the CIT has grown to embrace many, many people throughout the building, and we hope that more and more will attend and participate, as Brenda mentioned earlier.
And I think we didn't clearly explain like all of that pyramid. We had 3 sessions now, 2 focused on the social emotional concerns we have and social emotional supports that students need, and trying to put those into an MTSS pyramid. Like the green, this is the core, this is what everybody should receive or all teachers should be teaching. We've done that for social and emotional. Now we're working on the academic piece, and then we're going to combine it, and we're really going to prioritize, and that's how we're rebuilding our ship. Right now there's so much, we're all over the place.
I just wanted to say, I've worked with your team for the last 3 years. You've got a great team. The work that you guys is absolutely driven in student needs and highly focused, and I'm just really proud of your whole team and all the work that you guys do. It's exciting to watch. It gives me energy. So thanks for all that you do together in that work.
So I'm proud to represent our Western community on our school board. I want to be an encourager and a supporter and visible. I'm there often and watch the interactions. And I think it's very interesting that we are looking at our data in a growth mindset. And I think we've all probably read the book, and we see our tweets, centered on the book. Is it called Mindset? Yeah. And so that's so we're basing our improvement on some really solid data and works, and people around the country are doing. And I think it's such a great correlation that you are in a growth mindset. That you as a team are in this growth mindset. You just said it. You said, as we come together and we watch the pyramid grow. So I just think that's so cool that I don't even know if that's intentional on your part, but that's what I hear in my professional background, that you are as well conducting yourself. So you're looking for it in your students and measuring it and watching for their success, but we are also doing it as a team in our schools. So thank you. I had one other comment. I can't remember what it was. Okay, that's it. Alana, Member Oswald.
Thank you. Well, I think this is truly an exciting time to hear from you and how excited you are to embrace the change, and recognizing that there's change that needs to happen. And I think I'm very excited to provide and be part of us giving you some extra money to do that with compensatory ed funds.
Thank you.
And so I hope that you find that as encouraging to help you rebuild your boat. And, your boat's never going to be perfect because you're always going to want better. Let's just never settle.
We've been very clear to say those funds are going to fund the needs we see when we're done with this process.
Thank you. And that leads into my next question. And I'm not harping on it. I just know that you're getting extra funds, you're focusing on these things, you're talking about growth, and I'm looking at the student groups within your growth. Your goals are overall growth, but I need to speak for those people that are least achieving right now, and I want to know what are your ideas and how now that you have some funds, how are you going to reach the Black population and the American Indian population that are definitely not making gains for those 175 kids in the school in an exciting way and in an opportunity way.
Well, I think we have to think outside of the box. I think there's strategies out there that we aren't utilizing, and we need to reach out to other resources, and not just us trying to determine how to do that. I don't know, we're not there yet. It'll be part of the process.
And part of it also, am I talking?
No.
I'm loud enough, so part of the process is for us not to be the deciders of that, but to invite people in and ask what we can do. Because we don't have the answers. I can't say it. Listening to the group before us, I don't know what the needs are. I can hear it. And I'm looking at Bill. Every time I go to something, I get really frustrated with the systems that are in or not in place to allow for success for everyone. And I want to change them. But what I've realized through, again, work and book clubs and whatever that they've provided, that it's not about me coming up with a solution. It's about us asking how we can best support. And there's a lot of people coming out in our community as strong leaders, and it's about inviting them into our conversation. So I think that that's a good, it's about us asking and not telling.
And I think that's one of the big things of being the community school, that there's that collaboration, not only with just those within the school, but also the stakeholders outside the school, that those are part of that process and helping us define what needs to change and where we need to go with it and how to best do it. So.
Yep. Well, thank you all again for taking the time to present today and to be a part of this process, which, you know, I know this is the amount of time that what you put in on paper was many hours, and so really appreciate that. A couple of things. One is Chair Kirby and I were down lobbying the last 2 days, and we spoke a lot about our community schools and how proud we are of the work that is happening. And so just, I guess, one comment. I'd love to hear, Rachel, if you want to share kind of your perspective on your involvement, just briefly with what's been shared. And then secondly, I was curious about the home visit program. One of the things you all highlighted in different ways is relationships, and I know there's been great work done there, so I'm just curious about that. And then the last just comment before you respond is, I've had an opportunity to go out to Lincoln Park a lot as a school board member the last 5 years, and I always have felt this energy there that's been just, whether I've been there to check out the breakfast program or during the day, just this great positive energy. And so I just want to let you know, coming into your school, there's a good feeling going on, and I know there's a lot of hard work going on by staff, and so just thank you. So if you could respond to those couple questions.
Sure. So I've been the community school coordinator at Lincoln Park for 2 years now, and initially we started bringing well, there were some focus groups that happened before that, but a big piece of it is just bringing parents and community members and community agencies and partners and staff together. So we do have a community school team that meets monthly to give input and oversight in that. I also think for me, being able to participate on the CIT, because that is the leadership team for our building, is important, and I think we're moving in a direction of wanting to align more of our, like what's happening. I think community schools, it's big. I don't want to take up the whole meeting, but it's kind of looking at holistically at everything that kids experience that contributes to their learning and well-being, whether that's academics or social emotional or enrichment or family stuff. So it's all connected, and I think looking at how that fits in with what happens during our school day and after school is important, and we'll continue that. I don't know if you had any, I could speak more to specific questions, but.
Can I add to that a little bit?
Yeah.
One of the things that we are trying to do for next school year is redesign our record of continuous improvement, or the continuous improvement process, to include the work that's happening in our full service community schools at our 3 sites. And so creating goals collectively, monitoring data collectively, and putting all of that in the same place is going to be really important, so we can monitor the outcomes of the work that we're doing as part of our full service community schools, as well as the other things that you guys have mentioned. And so how do we take all the data from all of our focus groups and surveys that we've done, as well as all of our demographic and our test data, and how do we use all of that to make decisions about kids, and how do we put that all in one place and monitor that work. So I'm excited about that change for next year, because it'll feel a little, and that was something we learned from Kyle when he came here from NEA, that we need to streamline those efforts in one place. So thank you, Rachel, for doing
that. Was that a nod for me? Thanks, Rosie. So parent-teacher home visit project. John Knoxheim and I were leading that, and then Knoxheim left last year, so it's been slow moving this year. I think we took off more than we could bite by inviting everybody in, all these people from all these schools. With me, this is an extra, not part of my position, nor is there any funding to pay for that position. So done the best that we can. In talking with Rachel and the importance of family and building family relationships, we did go to the school, community school, executive board a couple weeks ago, and the idea is to focus the remainder of our large grant that we received on supporting. Surprise, Tanya. Sorry, I don't think we've only kind of talked to you. Sorry. But it's to focus on those 3 schools and move parent teacher home visit, making sure that transition is there from the high school as well as the elementary school. So, and then hopefully we can spread it out, but that's an umbrella to support this without the funding and teachers are very resourceful, so it's exciting to see it go there. So,
can I just say something? Nope. I just want to speak a little bit too. We also restructured our parent-teacher conferences this year, and so as someone who maybe doesn't have as long of a line, there was some downtime, and I noticed that a lot of the parents who we either had a home visit with them, this is a student that I don't even work with anymore, would come up and talk. So maintaining those relationships.
I wanted to comment on about 5 different things, but the conversation kept going in different directions, so I'm going to try to wrap this all up into hopefully one comment that makes sense and hits them all. I might not succeed. There's lots of different things at all of our schools, and you're no different in that you share dozens of things almost that you're trying, right? You're attempting to see what works, right? And part of what I think is important is that I do think it's excellent that we're providing some additional resources to some of our schools to help support and fund that, but I think there needs to be a deeper look at how we provide resources to all of our schools so that they all have access to adequate resources to make improvement. And as board members, that's really a challenge that you're going to have to think about for years to come. But part of that is when you provide resource, right, you also need to provide accountability in terms of how are we measuring our improvement, how are we looking at how it works so that we know what's working well and what isn't, so that we're not misusing resource or using resource in a way that we could use in some other way that might be more effective. And so while it's important to provide resource, I also think it's very important to have structured accountability in place to understand and know how that improvement or how those initiatives are impacting improvement. But one comment that I wanted to make that piggybacks off the comment I made earlier is that I've seen a number of things that district-wide we've tried across multiple schools with different levels of success. But the thing we haven't really dug into is the core of what we do and how we do that, right? We assume that the base education we provide is already perfect. And we can just leave that system be as it is, and if we do all these extra other things around it, that's somehow going to make things better. And what I wonder is if sometimes we're avoiding the elephant in the room by not looking at the base of what we do and how we change that base for improvement for students. And the example, just one example I would give, and maybe our community through our community schools will tell us this, is that when we look at how we include different culture and cultural perspectives in our learning on a regular basis or don't, does that send a message to kids as a part of a base of what we do? I mean, if we have kids where we're denying them access to learning around their culture and cultural viewpoints, if we don't address that, what we might expect to see things like disengagement from school, poor attendance, poor communication with our schools, and then we run around to do a lot of other things to try to make up for that when really it's a core issue of what we do every day. That's just one thought, but it's something we haven't dug into deeply as an organization or put a lot of resource behind. And I'm hoping that with our conversations around culture, our conversations around equity, maybe we'll see fit to direct some resource to that to address the core of what we do rather than trying to plug the holes. Maybe that's one way we need to rebuild our boat. So that's just a thought.
And we would love to have you come to our meetings. They're every Tuesday for the rest of the school year from 3:30 to 4:30. They end and start promptly, so feel free. We would love, and you guys were good leaders, and so there's a list of things that everything that we adopt will have. Part of that is evaluation and accountability, because we all know that accountability is a huge large problem in our schools. I'll just put that there.
Chair Kirby.
Thanks. I would like to kind of build off and echo what Dr. Carey said. You've been talking very much about relationships and how important they are. Relationship with parents with the home visit, which helps with truancy and, I hope, truancy and attendance, keeps kids in school. But part of the relationship building with teachers and students is smaller classes. And I think that applies to you as well as it applies to all schools in the district. And I think that as we look through our budget and our discussions, I think you've emphasized how important that is. Thank you.
At the risk of continuing, I think we had rich conversations on our Monday too, because I think we gave it some time, but boy, Dr. Carey just really reconfirmed with me what even my years in the district have shared with me, and that is that for a long time, this is my personal opinion, maybe it's not, that we have always shortchanged our curriculum department. I don't care if it was 15 to 30 years ago when our contracts got settled and we applied more of our money to our salaries and less to our curriculum. We took money from professional development and oftentimes redistributed it. So we are in an area where we have neglected our curriculum. And now we are at this point. I think tonight we're looking at our math adoption and doing that. And I think we just adopted a reading curriculum, so we're making some gains. But and that's in the elementary as well. But in the high school curriculum, we have not changed things except for recently, which was, I think, a good move on our part, a little tweaking. But so yeah, our core, our base of what we do and what we're teaching in our classrooms. It isn't lost on me as a classroom teacher that the way to keep my kids in the seat, at least this is the way I think of my teaching, is I'm going to put something meaningful in my day every day so that when my kids come in, they know that Mrs. Lofeld has a plan, a target, a lesson, because if I keep them engaged and there's something on the menu every day, I think my kids will work harder to get there, maybe. That was always my philosophy. But thank you for your presentation. We'll work on curriculum as a board.
Sorry. You spurred me to a couple other quick thoughts. One is I want to kind of follow up on what Member Kirby said about class sizes. Is I would love to hear you speak a little bit as professionals about your opinions on smaller class sizes with the kids you're working with. And then the second, I always have two questions. I don't know why. Brenda, you mentioned the fifth grade transitions and kind of what you're doing, and I'd love if you could just briefly touch on a little bit more on some of the things. I know when you first started, you did some innovative things, working with bringing fifth graders and kind of knowing those numbers, or not fifth graders, the sixth graders coming in. So kind of two kind of questions, class size and then transition.
Well, transition, I can tell you one exciting thing we did last year, we're doing it again, is parent camp. So we're going to host another parent camp for grade 5 parents to come in. They're nervous about sending their kids to Lincoln Park Middle School. It's a big school and they're nervous. And we have parents come in and we have some things up on the board. It's run like an ed camp. Here's some topics we do want to talk about, but parents, what do you want to talk about? Put those topics up on the board, and then they rotate around every 30 minutes. They're at a different station, and they leave feeling really good. So we've got that launching again, end of April. Otherwise, counselors go out. Counselors go out and meet with our elementary feeder schools. They are invited in. Counselors have another session where parents do come in the spring. But I think that parent camp, we hope we have a really good turnout this year.
Great.
And I would just add the home visit, transition visits for the incoming sixth graders, and we are working a little bit with Myers-Wilkins with their community school with visiting some kids in their after-school programming. One of our guidance counselors and myself will be going over there, and then they'll be coming to us too to kind of get to know some current sixth graders who maybe could share some insights with them.
Okay, great. Any of
Class size. I always feel like you're looking at me. Lizzie?
No. I'm looking at all of you.
Okay, good.
That's
Go ahead.
I can speak to the class size a little bit. I have an elementary school background, so that was another lifetime, or it feels like a lifetime ago. But I know what it's like to have 27 kids with all different needs across the gamut. And one thing that, I completely agree, the smaller class sizes, like now in special ed, I'm working in small groups, and then the trans reading classes are much smaller than, the 27 kids that you'd get in a general ed. And a lot of you have been in my trans class, and you see the way that we run it, and part of that is from doing the Daily 5 inspired piece that I always did as an elementary school teacher, and having those stations so you're rotating around in your smaller groups. So it's groups of 5 students that travel to 3 different stations rather than trying to speak to everybody all at once, or it's kind of like herding cats when you're trying to get the attention of 27 second graders all at once. And so I feel like that kind of speaks to that piece, and I think too that I've heard students on my caseload having a hard time taking a test. Well, they weren't feeling good that day. Having a small group, you're able to kind of have those more private conversations. The same thing is happening. The same conversation is happening. They're being able to express how they're feeling, but different result.
I'm gonna add this. I don't know if you want to hear this, but I'm gonna say it because I'm a good advocate for our students. And I want you to know that this year, so we're talking about raising class sizes and all of that. I'm a reading interventionist. I'm an advocate for our reading students. And our trans reading classes are our most struggling readers. Those classes, we have one at 27. So that class should have been capped at 20, which even a class of 20 students for a tier intervention is incredible. And right now there's 27 kids in a room. So these are our kids who are the highest behavior. They are, majority of them have a lot of needs and a lot of avoidance skills. So when we're talking about class sizes, that's something also to consider, is our students who have a lot of needs. It's a lot different when I walk into, I'm at Ordine a lot and I'm at Lincoln Park a lot, and walking into a class of 30 students or 35 students in one building is very different than another building. Students already have the skills of how to do school a lot of times, not everybody, but the percent of students in a classroom already know to come in, they bring their pencil, they come prepared, or not because they're in middle school, whatever. But and when you have kids who are coming and you have 30 students and none of them know how to do school, and you're trying to do that on top of teaching what you're supposed to be teaching that they're going to be tested on, it becomes pretty difficult. So I appreciate the class size. I think that class size is important, but at the same time, I do think that the needs of students need to be considered. So 27 in one building doesn't feel like 27 in another, and that our funding should be supporting that. I mean, it would be interesting if you find yourself looking at trans classes, between the difference in the numbers of students in the trans classes between the schools. Don't say anything.
I'm going to say something now. I just want to say, we have 8th grade science right now, 39 kids in a class, 38 kids in a class, 38 kids in a class, and 37. Our 8th grade science is huge.
I just want to speak to the trans conversation. I know that Dr. Carey has been working with principals to talk a little bit about how we will plan for our intervention classes next year at the secondary level, and it's going to be critically important that we identify those students now in the spring so that we can properly identify the number of sections. I think some of the sizes that you experienced this year were because of students being enrolled in the fall after the staffing had already happened, or the point being, though, is this is the time of year where we have to identify and cap and plan for how many sections. This is the time of year that we need to do that. So, but I agree with everything you said. Okay, so you're next.
I think our 10 minutes was a
Yeah.
little long.
So many questions.
So I wasn't going to say this, but I know we're way beyond time. And I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to just because I don't think I've ever heard anybody publicly say it, and I know these get recorded, and it might be good to have this on the record. Yeah, they do. And so I shared this information with the board and with some of our board members who were present and our legislative delegation that was able to attend the meeting. And I was in a course one time as part of my superintendent's license where the professor shared a detailed breakdown of changes in education finance from 1991 to 2011. And he actually put together this beautifully detailed spreadsheet, which I found on my home computer the other day and shared out with people who were there. And what it showed essentially was that when you adjust for inflation, from 1991 to 2011, school districts received $1,900 per pupil less in state funding than what they did in 1991. That's the equivalent of about $16 million a year for an organization this size. Now you take a look from 2011 to current, I don't have that detailed breakdown, but I think the largest increase we've seen is around 2% in our basic aid allocation, which is the majority of our funding, which that doesn't pace with inflation. So one can assume that that disparity has likely only grown over that time to a number somewhere north of $2,000 per student. Now, lots and lots and lots of districts have tried to close that gap by going out for operating levies and trying to find other sources. And I think it's important for our community to know that that gap exists. It wasn't created by the local district. It's a function of state-level funding formulas over the years, and that if the local community doesn't choose to close that gap, that has real impacts on the programming and the support we can provide in our schools, and we, I think, have been seeing some of that over the years and feeling that over the last couple of decades. And so I just wanted that to go on the kind of public record as somebody noting that that is a very real thing that I don't know that our public is highly aware of.
I'm just going to tack on to that Tom Melcher, the state finance director, does a yearly update on those figures, and I believe the board received that whole report from Dr. Melcher, and so we have the updated that also shows that while Governor Dayton has been a friend of education and gone a long way to help catch us up, we are still behind those 1990 numbers.
Okay, we good to move on?
Yes, roll on.
All right.
Roll on out.
Thank you, Lincoln Park. You did a good job.
This boat on the road.
Okay, as we transition from one presentation to the next, I have invited our high school principals to join me for this next presentation. This is a two-part presentation. Very recently, the district received our updated graduation rates from 2016-17. So we'd like to be able to share with you that data as well as answer any questions you have about that data. But before we do that, I have a small slideshow that I will let the principals really walk through, talking about what are we doing across our buildings to have an impact on these graduation rates. So I want to pass it to our principals, okay?
And T, just, yeah, we can. After we do these short slides. Okay. All right.
Ready?
Good evening.
Hello.
Hi. Before we start, well, can we go back to the statement, because I love that statement. Graduation is the expectation. And we just want to start by recognizing and acknowledging that graduation, sometimes people believe, but it doesn't. Graduation doesn't just start at high school. It starts when kids are born, all right? And when we talk about the public schools specifically, we talk about a pre-K to 12 education. So we want to recognize and acknowledge that. We had an opportunity last year at Denfeld, and I know Denfeld and East this year will have our seniors go back to elementary schools. Part of that is really to recognize and acknowledge where they came from, and they didn't just land on our doors in ninth grade. That foundation and that support and that education started long before they reached the doors of high school. We have a role and a responsibility, but it started long before that. So I love when I see graduation as the expectation, because that is pre-K through 12, and actually, like I said, even before that, when people decide that they're going to bring somebody into the world. So with that, now we can go to the next one. We wanted to just cover that, again, staying with that theme of graduation being the expectation and not just being 9 through 12. There are district-led initiatives that have been going on strong. They're being embedded, and they are embedded from PLCs, professional learning communities, where our staff across the district and our buildings are working collaboratively to use real-time data to make instructional decisions. And those decisions are modifications, adjustments, and they happen within the time of being engaged in professional learning communities. We love the acronyms MTSS, but truly we know that kids need different things at different times, and when you look at that, that is a multi-tiered system of support where we're creating different systems from a core, when we talk about core or tier 1, where all students are receiving a school-wide system of support, to a tier 2 and to tier 3 and to a tier 3, depending on what their needs are. So in each of our buildings, we have a academic MTSS, and then you look at the social emotional side of an MTSS system. And then, of course, we, on an ongoing basis, work on positive school climate. As a district, we made a commitment long ago to, at a district level, as far as our goals and our resources, from our district climate coordinator, Ron Lake, to what we do within our buildings, focus on creating a positive school climate, which makes sure and assures that not only our schools but our classrooms are safe and welcoming. So that is those are some district-led initiatives that we work on an ongoing basis.
Continuous improvement teams, you just met Lincoln Parks. We have these in each building. This is a shared leadership structure, so at the high school level, we have representation from all curricular areas. We meet at minimum monthly. Sometimes it's more frequent than that. We are monitoring the needs of our building. So we kind of function like a building-wide PLC. We are talking more about what do we want our teachers to know and be able to do. And so we're constantly reevaluating that. They go back and check in with the PLCs in all of their departments and come back to the team with feedback there. And then we talk about, is there professional development we need? How are we doing on our action plan for the building? Right now, we're getting ready to do our comprehensive needs assessment, which I know is coming up in another slide for this year, and what kind of resources do we need and data do we need to look at to decide if we met our goals for this year and what are our goals for next year going to be.
And the next slide, not that you couldn't hear my voice, but in the next slide, as far as graduation, we look at world's best workforce. And as a district, we have invested in increasing our CTE offerings across the board within our high schools. I believe there might be some conversation as far as middle school, maybe that 8th grade year, of providing some CTE offerings. I think they do with I want to say not business. They don't call it business at middle school, but do they computers? Do they do something like?
So this is a nomenclature difference, but it's important.
Yes.
There are vocational programs at the middle school, but they don't call them career and technical education, because career and technical education is restricted to the high school, and it has to connect to post-secondary pathways.
So they start in middle school with vocational programs that then lead in. I got you. That then lead into students participating in our CTE programs, which are on the rise. I mean, students are enrolling in them and truly, I want to say, record numbers. I mean, we look at our graphic arts, when we look at our auto, when we look at medical occupations, and rightfully so, because as you look at our workforce and you look at the top 5 professions or careers over the next 25 years, do you know the number one career, the top one for over the next 25 years? Health occupations. That is the number one. And then it goes to engineering, business, those kind of things. But number one is health occupations. And I just want to say that each of us owns a car, and sometimes 2, and sometimes 3, and sometimes 5. So when we look at our auto, it's totally understandable how kids are getting into that field. We at Denfeld have had the opportunity through a grant, the federal grant, to implement BAR for 9th graders, which helps to not only strengthen relationships, but also helps 9th graders to start to delineate what are those careers and those fields and those pathways that they're looking at even at that time, and then moving toward connecting them with mentors and opportunities starting in their 9th grade year. That helps to refine what they do post-secondary. We also offer a variety of programs, options at the Alternative Learning Center. We have a seat-based program, we have independent study, we have the digital, online, and so I know that has taken off by leaps and bounds also and has grown exponentially. And then also we have American Indian Home School Liaisons. This isn't the sole, this doesn't encompass all we're doing, but we wanted to give you a snapshot of World's Best Workforce and the kind of things that we're doing as a district.
Just wanted to throw out there real quickly that I know Tanya referenced like growing in high need occupations. It is important, I think, for the board to know that Brad Vietz, who's our career and technical education coordinator, works actually very closely with our local economic development professionals, with our local government, to know regionally what the highest growth areas are and to try to align our programming to those growth needs so that if students are interested in beginning a realistic career field in our region, that they can start that right here while they're in our schools.
And to drill down even further from what Mike's saying, I mean, the industries are saying these are the hard skills, these are the soft skills that are needed for kids to succeed when they do get in those careers, and we are actually providing those through our WINs and other opportunities for kids to learn and to know those skills.
And he's also taking those to the state level because he serves on the boards at the state level as well.
Okay. Are you doing the achievement and integration? Would you like to do that?
I can just quickly.
We could do that.
I know, I just want to talk about it though, why it's on here. The next slide is an update on the Achievement Integration Plan. As you look at the last few slides that I've shared with you, these are all a variety of district-led initiatives that we're working on with that ultimate goal of improving graduation. The World's Best Workforce has a specific goal for graduation. These items here were pulled from our World's Best Workforce Plan, which is on our website, and then I also pulled some information from our American Indian Department about what are they doing to support graduation rates, and then I also pulled information from our Achievement Integration Plan on what we're doing within that grant to increase graduation rates. So we have lots of different spaces where this information is articulated, so as part of this presentation I was trying to pull it together. Now you can go ahead and share this.
Okay, thank you. In each of our buildings, at the high school level, I know there's a bullet on here, at the elementary level, they play an active role in providing support for interventions in reading and math. They do that and then some at the middle and high school levels. Our integration specialists have been critical, and I like that the Career Center is on here, because one of our big focuses for this year is to get the students that they work with connected with the Career Center, and they've been a big help with us making those connections, getting kids comfortable coming down there and using those resources. They've helped. Today they chaperoned the 10th grade field trip to Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College. So they help chaperone those things too, and so they're just a really strong presence in our buildings. They're also working on academic support in general, whether it's making sure students are checking their grades or connecting with families or helping a student learn how to talk to a teacher when they need help or when they want to retake a test. So that's been a critical position in both of our buildings.
Can I add to that just really quickly a point as far as the work that integration specialists are doing with registration? As students are registering for their classes and looking at what are those classes that they want to challenge themselves with and hone their skills, we've had at Denfeld integration specialists working directly with kids on looking at what is their plan. If they're a sophomore, what's the next 2 years look like? Junior, senior, freshman, the next 3 years. So they've done great work.
I just want to speak to this as well. On the original PDF that you have in your board packet, there was a typo. It said career centers. I meant to say achievement centers on there. This was a part of the previous grant that expired last year.
Yep.
So because this is last year's data, I included that. Just know that that work is shifted and changed as Mr. Howes will talk more about later. But you were already informed of that.
Okay. So I will talk a little bit about career centers. They are very minimally staffed, so we have 14 hours a week at each site, correct?
Yes, 14.
And they are career professionals who volunteer a lot more than the 14 hours that they're getting paid for, but they do just an incredible amount of work introducing our students to opportunities and careers that maybe they hadn't thought about before. So they have taken charge of setting up and arranging for the traditional post-secondary options. They bring in the colleges, they bring in the military, the technical schools. They have worked really hard in the last couple of years to make connections with the trade fields in our area. So we've had trade fairs in both of our buildings. They help us organize and go to the Construct Tomorrow event that was just at the we have had a really busy month. I mentioned that they brought in career fairs last year. We even had a job fair in the building, so we had people who came in and helped our students apply for summer jobs. That was fantastic and is expected to grow this year. Our career centers get together and talk about what the needs are, and they really work together to find those resources for us. So they bring in professionals for career talks, and they connect our students with those things. I just can't say enough about what a value we have in those career centers. So do you want to add to that too, or are you good?
Well,
okay.
Ditto.
And then...
All right. Really quickly, just wanted to give you a synopsis of a program that we were able to get a grant in our district. We call it the SSIP, but I'm not exactly sure what that acronym is for. But it is a grant that we received to specifically work on increasing graduation rates for SPED Ed students, Black and Native American, okay? And so we looked at what evidence-based practice we would be using, and out of that came to Check and Connect, which is an evidence-based practice from University of Minnesota and some other collaboration. And what we did was we have implemented that program at Denfeld. We have 2 full-time Check and Connect mentors who work specifically with Black students and Native American students to provide support in engagement, increasing engagement. It's a tier 2 intervention that they provide for our students. One of the graduates, and Tanya will share the information, but one of the things that was seen at Denfeld was we had a roughly 33% graduation rate. That word, okay, I'm just going to keep saying it. Rate for Denfeld in our 15-16 school year, and the graduation rate for this year, I'm going to round it, was 62%. For as a whole. You're saying this? For special education, sorry. For special education. And I think some of that is directly connected, pun intended, to Check and Connect. So, I know. So that's what Check and Connect, you can see more about it in the next slide as far as it being a 5-year grant, the things that we're specifically doing, mentoring students, as I've talked about, and we have specific data which speaks to monitoring students as far as their attendance, behavior, and grades. It's been very intensive and an excellent collaboration district-wide as far as Tanya and what she provides for us to be able to see, is it working or isn't it working? And so I want to just publicly, if these kind of things go on the record, I seriously publicly want to say thank you to Tanya, because we wouldn't be able to do the work that we're doing and know if it's making the impact that it's making without the work that Tanya's doing. Tanya Lake. Okay, there you go.
The other piece of this, we've been working with the Department of Education to implement Check and Connect, to do it well, and then to talk about possible scale-up efforts in our district, and if the data supports the scale-up efforts are important. So you can anticipate probably having a presentation in June or July from our Check and Connect coordinator, more specifically to share with you the specific outcomes of this program. And so that'll probably happen in a few months once we have that data collected.
Thank you. There's one last one, but I don't have it on mine.
I can.
Okay,
you got it.
So, as part of, how do I want to say it? As part of the 4-year graduation rate for the new ESSA, Every Student Succeed Act, they have now determined that a school that has a graduation rate that's below 67% overall or below 67% for any student-specific group will be identified for comprehensive support and improvement. In our district, there are 3 schools, Denfeld, Area Learning Center, and Merritt. Rockridge Academy.
And actually, we were notified today that Rockridge is no longer on that list.
Okay, so we have 2. That's good, great news. It's always better to, sometimes the higher numbers are better, not in this case, no. Denfeld and Area Learning Center. And so what we were looking at, there's a kickoff that we have registered for on March 29th. We have a team comprised of district and site leadership to attend the kickoff. Thank goodness they're doing it digitally for us at this point, and maybe we'll be connecting in person at another time to look at what supports they are looking at providing for schools who fall within this category of the ESSA legislation or statute. Yeah. So that was just an overview of wanting you to know that this is new. This is not. This was just released. Well, when I say just released, I mean we were informed about a week and a half ago.
As soon as the graduation rates came out, I think we were notified
when graduation
shortly
rates
after.
came out.
With that note, I will pass this on to Dr. Lake, and then we can kind of do an overall Q&A. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. Do you need me to project, or do you have copies?
I got it.
I'm going to try to.
You're going to take my screen? Okay.
We'll see. Okay. Otherwise, Amy, I think I shared it with you if for some reason. Oh, there it is. All right. Okay, before I get started talking about graduation rates for a graduating class of 2017, I just wanted to point out that this is a revised copy, so it's different from what you received previously in your packet. So on the title slide, it shows that it's revised, and then where there are revisions, I've noted it on the bottom of the slide. Just in transferring it from PowerPoint to Google, there were some tables that got off. So anyway. So the first thing I want to talk about in terms of graduation rates is the definition has changed. Now with ESSA being what's leading our efforts in accountability, there have been some changes. So the first thing I want to talk about is just the definition, which graduation rates are based on a cohort of 9th grade students. So they look at all the 9th grade students, they count them up, and then they add transfers into the district. They add that to the expected number of students that would graduate, and then they take out any transfers out of the district. They no longer expect them to graduate from our district. They join someone else's cohort. So then they look at the number of graduates within the 4-year period. A couple things to just point out. Care, treatment, and correctional facilities are not included in our district rate. That's actually the reason why Rockridge Academy is no longer identified as a school. As a part of ESSA, care, treatment, and correctional facilities are not judged in the same way in terms of graduation rates for support. 10 or more students are needed for us to report things publicly, and then 20 or more students are needed for a student group to be counted for accountability purposes under ESSA. So just to give you an idea, we had 722 overall students in our district in the 9th grade cohort. When we break it down into student groups, we had 31 American Indian students, 12 Asian, 19 Hispanic, 38 Black, 587 White, and 35 students who identified as 2 or more races. So that gives you an idea that
We're reporting out data publicly for all of our groups because they are over 10 students, but some of our groups are not large enough to be included in the accountability calculations under ESSA. And then all the rates that I'm talking about are reported as four-year graduation rates unless I specifically note otherwise. So some changes have taken place. One of them is we now have 7 ethnic groups that we look at results for. We have American Indian, Asian, Pacific Islander, or Native Hawaiian, Hispanic, Black, White, and 2 or more races. Previously, we did not have 2 or more races. Students would need to identify one or the other, and they fell into one. And just something noteworthy, we don't have any students right now who have identified as Pacific Islander or Native Hawaiian. So that's why you're not seeing data for that student group. Another thing that's new is the state is calculating out counter groups, which means when we're looking at data for special education, for example, they specifically calculate out a graduation rate for students who do not qualify for special education. Same thing for free and reduced lunch and not free and reduced lunch qualifications. Couple other things, students who drop out of high school after spending less than an academic year at a place will be counted as a dropout at the school where they spend most time. So previously what would happen is if a student transferred into Denfeld or East, for example, even in May, just right before graduation, they count for the graduation rate previously for the school that they transferred into. Now they will count for wherever they spent the most amount of time in that academic year. Foreign exchange students are no longer a part of the cohort. 7-year rates are now calculated, which is a good thing because we do have several students who are in our bridge program who are on IEPs, and their IEPs state that they would be in school until they're age 21 working on their specific IEP goals. And all of the rates that I'll be talking about tonight, they have been recalculated, so they are comparable over time. So if you've seen previous reports prior to this year, the numbers aren't going to match. So these are the new numbers moving forward, and they are recalculated back to 11-12. So this is a slide that just takes a look at where we compare in terms of the state, where our district is overall, and then where our high schools fall. You can also look at some trends over time, and one of the things I wanted to point out is I often get questions about our district rate. How possibly can our district rate be 76%? Is one of the questions that I get when East graduation rate is around 93% and Denfeld is at 83%. And the reason for that is we have students who are in ALC, and we have quite a few of them. We have 137 students, and they count into our district's rate. So it's not a straight-up average of just Duluth East and Denfeld. It also factors in ALC, which, as you know, many of them are students from our district, but many of them are from area surrounding districts, too. This slide looks at how our student scores break down in terms of ethnicity. And, you know, with some of our groups, there's been quite a bit of variability, and part of that has to do with the number of students who are in the cohorts. As I mentioned a few slides back, some of our groups are small. So even a difference of 2 or 3 students can make a really big difference in what the graph looks like. American Indian students, I just wanted to point out, since 11-12, our gap back then was 35 points. It's now 25, which is still far too much, but we have had some improvement over time. Our Asian students are now outperforming our white students. Our Hispanic students, we've almost closed that gap. The gap currently is at around 7%, whereas previously we had been at 22%. With black students, our gap has risen quite a bit. So if you look back at 11-12, we've almost doubled it since then. And then when we look at students of 2 or more races, that gap too has grown. So you can see that although we've seen some over maybe the last couple of years with some of our groups, we do still have some very significant concerns with some of our student groups. This slide looks at students by meal status, whether they qualify for free or reduced price lunch or not. And you can see here over time that our students who have qualified for free or reduced lunch, that number has kind of bounced around a little bit. And we did see an increase in graduation rates for that student group over the last year. But the gap overall, if we look at a multi-year trend, we see that gap has remained the same. Special education, although it's been variable, you can see that over time it is trending upward, meaning that the gap is closing. Previously, the gap was 33-ish%, and now we're at 22%. So we're starting to see some numbers move there. And, as Tanya pointed out, Denfeld, for example, saw a significant increase, and that had a nice impact on the district overall. Gender is something that we also look at, and you can see that back in 11, the graduation rates were nearly identical. The male rate has been not as consistent as our rate for females, and currently there is a slight gap of about 6 percentage points. This is just something that we look at sometimes to see what's happening with our graduation rate, because if we have a graduation rate of 76%, that doesn't mean that the remaining students dropped out. The other things could be happening. So that's what you can see is going on here in Duluth. We had a 76.04 graduation rate, but the percentage of students who are continuing on with their education is around 10%. So 10% of our students are continuing their education. We have around 7% of our students where we don't know. They stopped coming to school, and we didn't get a request for records from another school district. We weren't able to contact them to see that they truly did drop out or not. They do count against, obviously, they do count against our graduation rate, but they're not coded as dropouts. We do have about 7% of our student population who are considered dropouts, and we're coded as such.
When do you code them as a dropout? What year?
At any point in time, if they've dropped out. I mean, if you definitively know from the student that they've dropped out, then they get coded that way. They can come back, and then they get counted back in the cohort as someone that we would expect to graduate, and then that end code changes. But those are the end codes that we have, is dropout, unknown, continuing, and graduate. And they count that at the end of the 4-year term. The end is the end, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. This is a slide that we've been looking at for some time now, and it's tracking some cohorts over time, because as I said, our graduation rate for 4 years for this year is 76%, but we're hoping that next year we have a chunk of more students that graduate and that we add to that, and that the following year after that we add more graduates. So we are able to look back to the 11-12 school year and track that particular group of students. So the 4-year graduation rate, for example, in 2011-12 was 76%. If we track them into that next year, we picked up a few more students, tracked a year later, a few more, and you can see. So at the end of 7 years, that particular cohort, we graduated 82%. So we do have data for 3 years that tracks out to 7 years, but you can see that we need more years to complete the table. And the rest of the slides, I'm not going to go through the numbers for you. They're more backup for your information. The first one just looks at our state and district graduation rates over time, as well as our schools that have groups large enough to report. The next one after that is our district broken down by ethnic group and by student population, special populations. And then we have each of our high schools broken out by ethnic group and by special population.
I'm kind of reading the graph.
Thank you.
Superintendent, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lake. You always do a really nice job of putting this in very user-friendly terms, so thank you. All right.
Superintendent.
Yes, I always appreciate, I see the data when it comes in reams of spreadsheets, and so my first call is always to Dr. Lake saying, you're working on this, right? Yeah. I do have a couple questions, and they're things that we've had some conversations about, and just seeking a little more clarity. And
Sure.
I know that there's been others having the same conversation, so I just want to make sure. I'm looking at page 39, and it's the graduation rates for all students, and we've had some conversations about ALC and when they are coded in more than one school.
Okay, so ESSA now has made some changes to accountability that I think will be helpful for us as a district. Previously, at least for our achievement results, if students attended ALC, or attended Denfelder East, physically attended Denfelder East, but part of their day they received school within a school interventions that are funded through ALC, part of their enrollment counted for ALC. And what would happen is those achievement results would get counted for our high schools, Denfeld East, and for ALC. And what would happen to the district rate is they'd end up counting double. And I know that sounds crazy, but I had to check back in my emails to make sure that I really understood that correctly. And I have that from Northern Center, well, they're the Northern Star, anyway, people that we had worked with in previous years. And that was the case. Now, since then, I've contacted MDE, and with ESSA changing over, students now count at the school that they spend the most time. So anything above 0.5, wherever their enrollment lies, that's where their achievement results will count, and that's where their graduation results will count. So that should help with some accuracy, especially in those cases where, the students physically are at a Denfelder East, don't ever attend an ALC, but still count at ALC. So that's been eliminated from the equation.
So it should be much more accurate.
It should be a better look at our rates.
Not counting the
our
students who
achievement.
are struggling the most twice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then on the next page, you talked a little bit about the two or more races and how students are identified. I know that early in the year there were some challenges with specifically American Indian students who were the differences in the number of students, and it was something with, now that there's the two or more races, if students were choosing two or more races, they were not being counted in our American Indian numbers, and so the funding levels were changing, and so they had to go in and change those students from two or more races to just be American Indian on record so that the funding would follow them. And I don't know if that affects how this shows up.
I guess I can't answer that specifically because I don't know what department at the state did that and if they're working together, but I can say that if you look specifically at our American Indian graduation rates, looking back at the old calculations and looking at them now, I wanted to just see how different they were. And they were quite different, especially, so any of our student groups where we have a smaller number of students, it had a great impact on their results. And the reason for that is students maybe previously were counted in the American Indian group or the Black student group, and now are not in that group. They were pulled from it and put into a two or more. Yeah, so there are our ethnic populations. Specifically, we saw more variability. We didn't see much variability in our overall district rate with the new calculations. With taking the foreign exchange students out and things like that, it was about a percentage point overall. It didn't vary a whole lot. But yeah, it did make an impact with our student groups, which makes me think that they included that two or more races if that's what they endorsed on their enrollments.
Thank you. I just have more of a general comment. Looking at the graduation rates at ALC, it makes me concerned because we have had a lot of conversation around equity lately, and I know that ALC has a huge amount generated of compensatory education that they do not realize, and with these really low graduation rates, I wonder how much more of that money they could realize that would help that that situation. Minus the various classes at Denville and East, I know they only got 90,000 at the ALC downstairs, somewhere around there. It was less than 100,000, and they generated 1.1 million. And I know we use some of those funds to fund other things administration-wise and that kind of stuff, but I think we as a board need to question if that's the best use of funds if we're going to tackle equity at 2 high schools. We have a 3rd high school downstairs that we need to be considerate of because every single one of those students qualify for that money. Just because they attend ALC, they're counted as automatically generating funds and as students in need. So I hope in the future we can focus on that also.
Superintendent Grandstadt.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that there's different categories. There's the independent study, there's the seat-based program, and then there are the intervention courses that are at Lincoln, Nordine, Denfeld, and East. Those are all funded with CompEd funds as well. So when we're looking at the funding from ALC, we really have to divide that into 3 different sections. And so the program that is here is the seat-based program. So that represents about 100 students of the 300 or 400 students that are served through their other programs. And we've been looking at this graduation rate too, and one of the requirements of students to be involved with this is that they are at risk of not graduating. And so I'm not saying that this rate is okay, but I am saying that the only students who are at risk of not graduating can be in this program, and they have to be significantly behind in credits.
So, to that point, I had one other comment to make, which is to the superintendent's point that he just shared. I'll go there first. I've often heard that sometimes in an ALC setting, it's best to look at the 5- and 6-year graduation rate because the students already come in oftentimes behind, and so it's very difficult for those students to catch up within the 4-year rate. But a really good indicator of how your ALC is functioning is looking at that 5- and 6-year rate and see if they really have high levels of graduation in those years. But the other point I was going to make, which hopefully I'm not harping on something over and over again tonight, but I wish I remembered the study. But I remember reading or hearing a report that said the greatest predictor of whether or not a student will graduate is how tightly their culture at home matches the culture of the school. Right? And when I say culture, we mean that more broadly than just ethnic culture, right? We also mean just other things they're interested in their way of life. And the reason I share that is because I think there's some small pockets where we've made some real improvement in terms of our teaching and learning and how that matches the things that kids value, right? Like we've done some excellent work with, say, our Fab Labs and other things that we've put in place that might match the things that kids value right now here today in the 21st century. But a criticism I would offer is that you can look at a lot of our programs, and if I could zip back to 1970 or 1950, it might not look a whole lot different in terms of the resources we're using, the concepts we're teaching, how we're teaching them to kids, the materials and supplies that are in the hands of our teachers to do that. And what that tells me is if we don't do something about that, the culture of our students, meaning their way of life and what they value, will only continue to diverge from that. And what you could expect, I think, if you continue to do that, is a student population that is ever disinterested and increasingly disinterested in the product we provide to them. And what you will see then is if you don't address that core factor, you will see a proliferation of need to do these other things to try to force students to stay engaged. And so I can't underscore the importance enough of making sure that we're listening to our students, listening to what they value in terms of their day-to-day teaching and learning, and then providing the support and resource there to make sure that we can achieve that for them.
Thank you for that. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. And the only challenge I have back to Superintendent Gronseth's comment is that we know all of these students eligible for ALC are in, need of graduating and have been identified as not necessarily going to make it, and so therefore resources are even more important to help them. There's an extra burden of responsibility there that we know we have to catch them up, be it in a 5 or 6 year graduation rate, but still we're responsible to make sure that they get the education that they're here for. So.
Thank you guys for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody doing okay? We can keep going.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. I really appreciated this presentation and also how you added the front end to it again. I think you did some of that last year, but just kind of what are the district-wide initiatives and all of that to kind of see the full picture of the investments. And you used investments a lot in your presentation, so I appreciated
And Tanya was exactly right, that this starts before 9th grade, and that's been our message, that it starts, we're advocates for early childhood and strong elementary programming all the way through, so. Cute.
And that's so cool.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to, you're going to take a break?
Well, no, we're not going to go on a break.
Okay.
We're not.
Sorry, I don't need one.
Okay.
Keep going.
So we're on to regulations. There's regulations 513R on promotion, retention, and program design. Do we need to say anything about that, or are we? Okay, Mike, you should say something about that.
I'm trying to scroll back to the right page to make sure that I have the information in front of me because I was
54.
Okay. So this is more of an informational item because when it comes to board function, right, we bring policy for action items, but the regulations are really just a description of administratively how we carry something out. And so when we're combining some of our policies and our policy work that we're doing, we also have regulations that were attached to old policies that we've removed. And so we're trying to fold those regulations underneath now the proper policy in our system. So a couple of those are that one, we've had our early admission to kindergarten criteria for how we assess students who might want to enter kindergarten early. That has existed in a different place, so we're folding that process under this regulation. And we also have some language around how we make retention decisions, right, when we choose to hold a student in a grade level, and that has also existed in a different regulation that hasn't been attached to a formal policy now for a few years. And so we're just making the proper shift and including it underneath the regulation that attaches to an active policy.
Continue. We don't need to talk about any of the other. I had one just quick question about retention and promotion and how it looks like, what that looks like in the middle school and the high school. And do we set standards for credits earned and what grade level will allow that student to be in?
You know, I'd have to look at our formal policy. I couldn't quote that right off the top of my head. I don't believe in our organization because I've got muddled about 2 or 3 different districts I've worked in my head in terms of their policies from memory. I don't believe we have organizationally a formal policy that says you need a certain number of credits to be considered at the next grade level.
We don't, and it's related to Minnesota High School League rules that you can only play for 4 years. And so and being identified as a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and if you're credit-wise tracking that, it's not really on that 4-year track. We have had other conversations about that as well, but really wanting to show that this is really a 4-year process. We have certainly had students repeating courses from, until they are successful, but have not gone to you don't get the title of the class, or right.
Grant applications.
So we've got 5 grant applications. Most of these are teachers seeking out resources to support activities or things happening in their classroom, but I just wanted to point out the 5th one is a application we have submitted for to help build some district sustainability around our PBIS efforts. As a district, we have more and more of our schools coming on board to implement PBIS, and so now we're looking to create a district leadership team that will oversee this work.
Okay.
And they have grants available for teams to do this. So we will be beginning that process this spring with those grant dollars if we're awarded, and I think we will be.
Good. So we're going to invite William Howes up to the table, because I think our next is action items, and it's a presentation about achievement and integration. Okay.
Are we ready, or are we waiting for someone to come back? All right. I'm not sure what the agenda says. I'm not here to do an overview on the whole plan. I'm here to present and talk about the budget for next year. Obviously, the budget contains the programming and things that we intend to continue to do, which will be the second part of our second year of our current three-year plan. You can see the total amount. Hopefully, if you have it with you, I did not bring additional copies because I'm trying to reduce, reuse, and recycle as often as possible. So if you don't have one, the total for AI revenue for next year, as projected, is $1,675,108. That is an increase of estimated just over $24,000 from this current year. So I'll start with just indicating that $24,000 is additional for next year is planned to be, we increased some areas in family engagement programming, also some areas within professional development district-wide, as well as professional development specifically at Myers-Wilkins and Lowell, which are, Myers-Wilkins is the RIS, or racially identifiable school site. We also, through the staffing and different discussions, identified the need for additional contracted services. I know you see a lot of contracts from our office. That is because we are constantly trying to ensure that all of our students are having the opportunity to have some integrated learning opportunities in our schools. Because unfortunately, if we do not do that, I am fearful that we will not have nearly enough, and still to this day, much of the integrated learning that happens within our schools is provided through staff and opportunities that the Office of Education Equity specifically develops, puts together, and provides for students. And so contracted services was an area that was identified as a need for some greater funds, as well as after-school and summer programming, most specifically at Myers-Wilkins, and also to help address any salary and benefit costs increase needs. As you know, from year to year, staff cost more money if their salaries go up or if benefits costs go up. So we have to be sure that we can address for that. Other than that, like I said, next year will be the second year of our three-year plan. We do not have any changes to the programming that we are currently providing. We will continue to provide the specific programs, or they call them interventions, that we are currently providing. Hopefully, obviously, every year from year to year, working on how do we improve that within our own programming that we provide. And so wanting to get the most out of our AI revenue, as well as wanting to get the most out of each and every staff person that we have within our program. I will say that this first year, we are already learning some things about things that we might do a little bit differently, sometimes in the areas of professional development, adjusting. We have a substitute teacher shortage. So we wrote a plan to provide 4 sessions for 64 different certified staff members to participate in 4 full days of training on, I will say this because I have the microphone, on 4 areas that are proven by the National Education Association as to how you close achievement gaps. And I would challenge the board that whenever you ask a question of any staff member or CIT team, that team must have an answer as to what are they going to do or what are they currently doing to close achievement gaps. Not having an answer or asking community members as professional educators, the expectation has to be much greater than I don't know. I'll ask someone else. Because if you asked me what we should do about integration and I said I don't know, I hope that you all would say, I'm not sure why you're here then. So as educators, we have to have answers for what it is that we are doing individually and collectively to address achievement gaps. One of those areas is in professional development. One of the things that we have learned in our program and what we are trying to do through our CARE Academy, which is culture, abilities, resiliency, and engagement, if you impact those 4 areas, we will find that we will see changes in the achievement gaps that our students are experiencing. And so, but in order to do that and train teachers, you need substitutes if you're going to have them out of the building. And we don't currently have the ability to have 30 or 20 staff who need a substitute to be out of the building 4 days out of the year. So we have a need to adjust that, and we are making changes to have some of those days be a part of before the contract year starts and one day after the contract year ends, and then we compensate them for their time, which then eliminates the need for substitute time. And the trade-off is it's actually cheaper to pay a teacher to do the 8 hours in a day than it is to pay them to do for a substitute. So not because we value that less, it's just we're adjusting to the needs of what has to be done so that we can ensure that we are in fact trying to impact the professional development of our staff. So I don't know if folks have questions about specifically areas in the budget. I know a lot of people were coming up here and they were saying that they were going to cry and stuff if they talked about Amy or Mike. I'm not a crier, but since I'm here, I might as well say that it's the end of an era. I know I'll be back one more time, but I don't know if they'll both be here, and I don't know if the cameras will be on. So I have truly enjoyed working with Amy and found her to be absolutely supportive and to utilize our program and our staff in ways that were meaningful, and believe and understand how much she cares about student success, but also in the accountability and the hard work that educators need to do. And Mike has been somebody from the beginning who has always been, nothing against anyone else, or any of my other supervisors, but one of the supervisors who has been absolutely committed to getting to know me as a person and to be culturally responsive to who I am. And I've worked for other programs that were Ojibwe specific based, language based, and I never had a supervisor who called me by my real name before, ever, in 20 plus years of education. But I guarantee that Mike Carey will probably never forget that name and is very comfortable in calling me that in front of other people, even when they have no idea who he's talking about, and I'm sitting in the room. But it sure makes me feel good and it makes me feel like the culture of our meetings and the culture of the place that I come to work in and that I care about, that I belong there. And that's a huge indicator. And I say that as much to say that that also is what our program strives to do and what I hope our district strives to do, not just for our staff, but also for our students. Because those are the types of things that change our rates as well. So I don't know if people have specific questions about the budget, but other than that, those are the things that I just wanted to point out.
I just had one question. Can you remind me where the integration specialists are located, and are they planning to be in the same places next year?
The integration specialists are located at Myers-Wilkins, Lowell Elementary, Piedmont Elementary, and Laura MacArthur Elementary. They're located at Lincoln Park Middle School, Ordine East Middle School, East High School, Denfeld High School, and halftime at ALC. And there are two at each of there are two full-time at Denfeld, two full-time at Lincoln Park, and 1.5 at East, and they share the other 0.5 with ALC. And that's out of number of students and identified need, and trying to be responsive to that. I sure hope so, because I've been here for over 2.5 hours. Just so you know, as a point of information, I think at some point over the years this used to be a required thing, either through legislature or through MDE. One point of information that they shared with us this year is that this no longer is something that MDE or requires us to do, is come here each year and say, here's the updated budget. I continued to do it this year because I don't want to look like I don't want to come here and share that information. It's not that. If the board determines that it's not necessary, and it's only necessary that we do it on our 3 years when they are, and trust that myself and the superintendent or whoever my other supervisor is will submit the annual budget based on that time. It doesn't, unless we were to change our plan, which the board would have to approve that amended plan, we're not really in a situation to really change up a lot of the, other than different smaller amounts of money. We said we were going to do something for 3 years, like integration specialists or professional development care academy. We can't just wipe that out from year to year. If we were going to change it, kind of like Rosie's question, if we were to put integration specialists at another school site other than what we currently have, we would have to amend our actual plan, and then the board would have to approve that, and then MDE staff would have to approve that in order for us to actually shift people around. Because in our plan, it asks where integration specialists will be, and that's where they need to be. So, we didn't want to change that because I didn't want to make it seem like it was a thing, but I figured I should explain that if the board doesn't find that necessary, we don't have to, but I will sure continue to come here each March, mid-March, and do that if the board would like. So,
I do want to just say while you're still here, I have, of all of the things in the plan, I think one of the most powerful pieces is the Care Academy piece and the professional development, because we know the work really starts in the classroom between the teacher and the student. And that's truly what that professional development is about. How can teachers learn practical strategies to implement with their students to have a result on the achievement gap? And so I believe wholeheartedly in that model. We need to engage teachers again next year. It's a 3-year cohort model. And I've just really appreciated the thought you've put around that. And we can problem solve some of those sub-issues and things to make sure that people have access to that training. So thank you. You've done a nice job with that.
Thank you. Okay, I just, 2 quick things. One is, I actually would appreciate if you did come in March, because I think it's just really helpful, for example, for a year like this where we have new board members as well, to better understand and appreciate the depth and breadth of what you do. And then secondly, I just wanted to kind of second what Amy said. I really have appreciated the investments in professional development district-wide, and just hearing from staff what they've gotten out of it as well. And so I was glad when you said you, I think, increased that some, and appreciate all that you've done in that area. So.
I too have heard from many of the staff that have participated in CARE saying that it has been the most significant learning that they have done in years, and so it's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that it's continuing, and I agree that we should make it a priority. I know that sometimes when we have a shortage of substitutes, and I know that on any given day in the district we have about 50 people out for various reasons, and so I think developing, I know that there's a calendar that shows what things are planned when, and if we're really intentional about blocking out certain days where only this is going to happen, I think that we could get a little farther on that, even though we know there's another 50 subs somewhere in the district. I like the idea of summer academies, but I worry sometimes that if they are right after the school year, that then there's the summer gap. And so if there was a summer academy, I think August might be a better opportunity.
Just so you know, like, the plan is to have one day in August, then 2 days that are during the school year, but it's not all 4 days during the school year, and then the final full day would be on in June sometime. So it is to hopefully make it a longer ongoing piece where it begins in late August, ends in early June, but then has 2 days in between. And we have 4 other 2-hour after school times that we also provide in between each of those full days, so it kind of keeps every month or two it's ongoing. And so I don't want to do a whole week because too much is lost, and it's too much of seems like a one-time learning experience, and we know that's not a high level of professional development for our staff.
Elementary math work was my favorite topic.
Very quick piece of background is that I'll keep it fast. There's a standards revision cycle, right, that the state engages in. And typically what we do is we adopt new resources essentially a year and a half to 2 years after they approve those new standards, because they give you some time to prepare and implement those. By our old standards adoption cycle, we should have adopted math a few years back, but the state reworked that adoption cycle at the state level and pushed back the timeline for math. So what that did is, when we typically adopt new resources, especially when they're consumable, right, they're workbooks that get used each year, we'll engage in a contract where they provide those for the life of the adoption. Well, that's what happened about 10 years ago. That contract ran out, but we don't have a new adoption now because of that change in the new revision of standards for now another 4 or 5 years, because they skipped over an adoption cycle in math at the state level. So what we've been doing is each year we've been purchasing the replacement consumables we'd need for the next school year. And so the quote you see shows essentially the total number of new consumable math workbooks that we'll need for next school year. And the reason you see it coming from 2 different vendors, I know that can be a question, is that because our materials are a bit dated now, there are companies out there that will buy up surplus stock, surplus unused books from other districts who have maybe chosen to go a different route in their curriculum. And so they're able then to resell those to us at a fraction of the cost of what a brand new one would cost from the vendor. And so trying to be fiscally responsible, we contacted Follett, who's a company we work with regularly who does that work. They were able to tell us how many they had in each grade level, and we're purchasing as many of those as they have, right, to save the district money. And then for the numbers that they can't cover, we're going directly to Houghton Mifflin, who is the printer or the creator, to provide us new copies at that higher cost. So there's two groups because we're trying to save ourselves some cash.
Right. And
So we have a couple different policies where we're bringing in the new MSBA policy that's then requiring the deletion of the old policy. So the two policies you see listed there for deletion, 5010 age of entrance and 6085 organizational plan for the delivery of instruction, are now covered under the other two policies you see below. So 6085, which is number B2 on your agenda, is covered by policy 607, which is B3. And then the age of entrance policy 5010 that we're deleting is incorporated now under policy 513, which is student promotion, retention, and program design. So what it is two new policies coming in, the MSBA policies, and you can see the recommended language there, and then the deletion of the existing policies that correlate to that. Bill's laughing at me because I'm leaning forward close to the mic.
Any lights on? Any questions on those? Is what we see in front of us on our screens with the red and is that like the MSBA then?
So typically,
or did we write this ourselves because MSBA didn't have one?
So what'll happen is, like policy 513, the lettering that's in black is the original language of the policy. If we strike out any language, like there's language in it that we don't want as part of our final policy, you'll see the strike through line. And what we're saying is that was then language in the original policy that we're not keeping. And then anything that's in red is added language. So that's the new language that wasn't in the MSBA policy that we're saying we should add organizationally.
Yep, okay. That's what confused me, is I thought it was but then when we put in some red, and so we're just adding what our ISD needs.
Yeah, we start with the MSBA policy as the base, and then we look at what our local practices have been and what fits well for our organization, and we strike through the pieces of that policy that we don't need or we don't believe we need here, and then we add in red the additional pieces that we think we need to add for our organization. So it keeps it clear for board members what the original language is, what's being taken out or proposed to be taken out, and what's being proposed as an addition.
Mine's just kind of a reminder process question. So this is the first reading. If you miss something or we don't talk about it this time, it has that second reading. So it's okay if we wait and ask more questions next time. You kind of have 2 months. So just to kind of clarify that.
Which is the next section.
Okay. But only at the
board meeting. So those are the grants that we're getting.
Okay. So, and the diploma requests too?
You read those?
But we don't do that now. We just say we'll have some at the meeting. We'll have some grants.
Yeah.
How many where are my grants?
Is under resolutions.
They're under
okay. Acceptance of grants awards. I got it.
And then
so.
The extended field trips. But the board will approve them or not approve them.
And our future items next month are a Head Start and Duluth Preschool update. What is EEAC? Advisory Committee. Okay. Yep, and we have some board members that sit on that as well. And then some policy updates. Hey, that's a wrap.
That is.
Thank you. Thanks. Oh, and yeah, I'll turn.